This comparative study applies Lacanian psychoanalytical film theory to Hereditary and A Tale of Two Sisters, examining how family trauma destabilizes identity through the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan reinterpreted Freud's ideas about the unconscious, arguing that identity is not stable but constructed through psychological and social systems. Writing in the mid-20th century, Lacan proposed that human subjectivity is shaped through language, perception, and symbolic structures. His theories later became influential in psychoanalytical film theory, where cinema is examined as a medium that reveals unconscious fears, desires, and identity conflicts. Lacan proposed that identity operates through three interconnected systems known as the imaginary, the symbolic, and the real. The imaginary relates to illusion and misrecognition, where individuals construct identity through distorted perception. The symbolic represents social structures such as language, authority, and family hierarchy. The real refers to trauma that cannot be fully explained or contained within language. Hereditary, directed by Ari Aster in 2018, is an American psychological horror film that follows the Graham family as they begin to unravel after the death of their secretive grandmother. As grief intensifies, the family begins to uncover disturbing aspects of their ancestry and the psychological toll of unresolved trauma. A Tale of Two Sisters, directed by Kim Ji-woon in 2003, is a South Korean psychological horror film that follows two sisters returning home after the time spent in a psychiatric hospital. Their return home gradually reveals tensions within the household and exposes the psychological consequences of repression and guilt. The justification for this comparative study is that, despite different cultural contexts, both films use psychological horror to expose how the breakdown of family authority leads to fractured identity. Through Lacan's three orders, this comparison demonstrates how American and South Korean cinema externalize trauma differently, yet reveals similar anxieties about grief, repression, and instability within the family. In this upcoming comparative study, we will use Lacan's framework to analyze how each film represents identity fractured through three central dynamics: distorted perception within the imaginary, repression and family authority within the symbolic, and psychological rupture through encounters with the real. The first analytical pillar examines Lacan's concept of the imaginary. In Lacanian theory, the imaginary refers to illusion, misrecognition, and the unstable construction of identity through images. In Hereditary, the imaginary emerges through Annie's miniature models, which recreate moments from her family life in meticulous detail. By constructing these small-scale environments, Annie attempts to visually reorganize traumatic events and impose a sense of order on experiences that feel emotionally chaotic. Lacan's concept of misrecognition becomes very visible here, as Annie interprets her grief through these images rather than confronting the instability within her own household. The miniatures transform painful memories into controlled visual objects, creating the illusion that trauma can be understood and contained. This visual reconstruction therefore reflects Annie's psychological attempt to stabilize her identity after the loss of her mother. The models also frame the family as objects within a controlled environment, reinforcing how Annie attempts to understand her trauma through representation rather than reality.
I don't like this.
A similar dynamic appears in A Tale of Two Sisters, where the narrative is filtered through Sumi's unstable perception of events within the family home. Rather than presenting reality objectively, the film gradually reveals that Sumi's understanding of the household is shaped by unresolved trauma and emotional repression. Within Lacan's imaginary order, identity becomes unstable when individuals interpret events through subjective projections rather than external reality. Sumi's hostility toward her stepmother therefore reflects a psychological reconstruction of events that allows her to displace guilt and grief onto another figure. The film's perspective aligns the audience with Sumi's perception, encouraging viewers to initially accept her interpretation of the household. This narrative alignment demonstrates how the imaginary can distort both personal identity and the perception of others within the family structure. Both films therefore illustrate Lacan's concept of the imaginary through characters who reconstruct reality in response to trauma. In Hereditary, Annie attempts to visually control grief through miniature representations of her family life. In A Tale of Two Sisters, Sumi interprets the household through psychologically distorted perception. In both cases, illusion becomes a coping mechanism that temporarily protects the characters from confronting the deeper psychological consequences of their trauma. The second analytical pillar examines Lacan's concept of the symbolic order. In Lacanian theory, the symbolic refers to the systems of authority, language, and social rules that organize identity within society, and particularly within the family structure.